You have been taught that this emptiness is a flaw, a failure of your own spirit. You have been told to fill it, to run from it, to distract yourself from its hollow ache. I am here to tell you that everything you believe about this feeling is a profound and tragic mistake. This emptiness is not your enemy. It is not a void to be feared. It is, in fact, the most precise spiritual signal you will ever receive. It is the unmistakable evidence that the temporary, the material, the world of form has reached its limit in your consciousness. It is the deep, inner soul crying out that it is finished with the old and is now prepared at last to receive the new. What you perceive as emptiness is, in truth, a sacred capacity being formed within you. Stay with this, and you will discover why this feeling is the necessary prelude to a fulfillment that the world can neither give nor take away. We have all stood in that place, in the quiet of our own hearts, when the world seems to fall silent. The achievements we chased feel like dust. The relationships we nurtured leave a faint echo. The possessions we accumulated stand as hollow monuments. And in that stillness, a single, unsettling question arises. Is this all there is? The world, of course, has a ready-made answer for this feeling. It tells you that you are not enough, that you need to acquire more, do more, be more. It prescribes a frantic search for the next promotion, the next vacation, the next purchase, the next relationship, promising that this next thing will be the one to finally plug the drain. So you run, you strive, you fill your calendar and your mind with noise, all in a desperate attempt to outpace the quiet ache within. But I tell you, this is the great deception. This running, this striving, is the very mechanism that perpetuates the emptiness. You are trying to fill a spiritual void with material answers, and it is a geometric impossibility. It is like trying to satisfy a deep, physical thirst by painting a glass of water. The image does nothing for the parched throat. The form cannot quench the need that exists on an entirely different level of being. Consider the simple, everyday experience of outgrowing a beloved book from your youth. There was a time when that story held you captive. Its characters were your companions, its world your escape. You could read it again and again, each time feeling a sense of completion. Then, one day, you pick it up and the magic is gone. The words are the same, the plot unchanged, but something within you has shifted. The book feels small, its lessons simplistic. It no longer fills the space in your consciousness it once did. This is not the book's failure, nor is it yours. It is a signal. It is evidence that your capacity for understanding has expanded. Your inner being has grown, and the old container can no longer hold the new consciousness. The emptiness you feel for that book is, in fact, a testament to your growth. Now, transpose this onto the grand stage of your life. The career that once ignited your passion now feels like a series of mechanical tasks. The social circles that once provided comfort now feel superficial. The philosophies and beliefs that once offered absolute answers now feel confining. This is not a sign that your life is broken. It is the exact opposite. It is the most precise indication that your spiritual identity is evolving. The forms of your life, the job, the relationships, the ideologies were like that beloved book. They served a divine purpose for a season. They held a specific measure of truth for the being you were then. But now, the soul within is pressing against its confines. The old wineskins can no longer hold the new wine. This feeling of emptiness is the sound of the old structure cracking. It is the necessary collapse that must precede any new construction. When a builder erects a new skyscraper, he cannot simply build on top of the old, outdated structure. He must first clear the land. He must create a vacant lot, an empty space, a seeming void where something once stood. To the passerby, this looks like loss, like destruction. But the architect knows this emptiness is the most critical phase of the entire project. It is the only ground upon which the new, greater vision can be realized. Your sense of emptiness is that sacred, cleared ground. It is the proof that the architect within is preparing for a new expression of life, one that the previous structure of your understanding could never support. We misinterpret this cleared ground as a wasteland because we are terrified of the silence. We rush to plant weeds in it, new distractions, new attachments, new intellectual concepts, just to see something growing there. We are afraid that if we do not fill it, nothing ever will. But this is where the great transition occurs. This is the pivot from the life of seeking to the life of receptivity. All your life, you have been taught to seek, to grasp, to attain. You have been the active force trying to capture God, truth, fulfillment, as if they were objects to be acquired. But in this state of emptiness, that entire paradigm is revealed as futile. You are being led, often through the sheer exhaustion of your own efforts, to the end of seeking. You are being brought to the bank of the river, not with a cup, but with a soul that has been hollowed out into a vast vessel. The activity is no longer yours. The striving must cease. The emptiness is not a vacuum that you must fill. It is a capacity that is being prepared for a divine impouring. It is the unformed, potential space that awaits the presence of the infinite. The thirst you feel is not the problem. It is the evidence of the coming water. The hunger is not the enemy. It is the confirmation that a feast is being prepared. This emptiness is the soul's deepest prayer, not spoken in words, but lived as a profound and holy silence, creating the exact space where grace can finally make its home. This collapse is not a gentle fading, it is a fundamental and necessary disintegration. We speak of the world of form, and this is everything that can be perceived by the senses, everything that can be grasped by the mind, everything that has a beginning and, inevitably, an end. Your identity as a professional, your role in your family, your standing in the community, your carefully constructed beliefs about God, about life, about yourself. These are all forms. They are the furniture with which we have filled the rooms of our consciousness, and for a long time, they provided comfort and a sense of location. We believed they were solid, permanent, and real. But But the spiritual signal of emptiness is the first tremor that reveals their true nature. They are temporary structures, and they are failing under the weight of a greater reality. Consider the simple, powerful experience of grief. When someone you love passes from this world, the form of that relationship, their physical presence, their voice, their daily role in your life shatters. The world tells you that you have suffered a loss, and indeed, from the perspective of the world of form, this is undeniably true. But in the profound emptiness that follows, a strange and sacred thing can occur. The Vez form of the relationship has vanished, but the Zai essence of it, the love, the connection, the indelible impact on your soul, often becomes more palpable, more real than ever before. You begin to feel a presence that is not dependent on physical proximity or conversation. What has happened? The form has collapsed, and in its dissolution, the eternal substance behind the form is revealed for the first time in its pure state. The form was merely the container. The emptiness allows you to experience the content directly. This is the secret purpose behind every collapse in your life. It is not destruction for its own sake, but a violent and gracious removal of the container that has become too small for your understanding of what it held. This principle operates in every facet of a seeking life. You may have spent years building a professional identity around a certain title or skill set. You derived your sense of worth and purpose from it. Then, through a layoff, a shift in the market, or simply an inner disillusionment, that form collapses. The title is gone, the function is obsolete. The initial feeling is one of terrifying emptiness. Oh, who am I now? That echoes in the silence. The world urges you to immediately scramble and build a new form, to find another title, to grasp a new role. But the spiritual signal is asking you to pause in that emptiness. It is inviting you to discover that your true identity was never in the title or the job description. Your worth, your capacity for intelligence and creativity, your very being, exists independently of that form. The collapse of the career was the demolition of a set that had served its purpose, allowing you, perhaps for the first time, to stand on the unchanging stage of your own innate being. The same is true of our most cherished spiritual and intellectual concepts. We build altars in our minds to specific ideas of God, to political ideologies, to philosophies of how life should work. We cling to these forms as if they were truth itself. Then, life presents us with a circumstance that our form cannot explain, cannot accommodate. A tragedy occurs that our concept of a benevolent God cannot reconcile. A political leader we championed reveals feet of clay. A lifelong belief is proven incomplete. The form of our understanding cracks, and we feel a deep intellectual emptiness, a crisis of meaning. We feel lost, adrift. Yet, this is the precise moment of greatest opportunity. The collapse of the conceptual form is the only thing that can free us from the prison of a known God, a packaged truth. It creates the vacancy necessary for a direct, unmediated experience of the infinite that can never be contained within any single dogma or philosophy. The emptiness is the burning away of the map, forcing you to look up and behold the actual territory. It is the silent, potent space where the living God, not the conceptual one, can make itself known. The forms were like training wheels. Their collapse is the evidence that you are finally ready to ride the bike, to know balance not as a theory, but as a lived reality. This is the arduous, glorious transition from a faith built on words to a knowing born of experience. And it cannot happen until the world of form you relied upon has fallen utterly away. And so we arrive at the threshold of this sacred vacancy. The old structures have proven their temporariness, and their collapse has left a silent, open space within. The instinctual panic begins to subside, replaced by a new and unfamiliar question: if I am not to rebuild the old, and if I am not to frantically chase a new form, then what is the purpose of this emptiness? The answer is the most profound secret of the spiritual path. This emptiness is not a void to be filled, but a capacity to be utilized. It is the making of room. For your entire life, your consciousness has been furnished with the noise of the world, its demands, its definitions, its endless cycle of acquisition and loss. There was no space for anything else. Now, with that furniture cleared away, there is, for the first time, room. This is the sacred capacity, the hollowed-out vessel that is now prepared to receive something of an entirely different order. Imagine a student of a great master painter. For years, the student fills canvas after canvas, practicing techniques, mimicking styles, trying to capture the beauty they see in the world. Their studio is cluttered with their own efforts, their mind crowded with the rules of composition and color theory. Then, one day, a moment of utter frustration arrives. They throw down their brush, seeing all their work as shallow imitation. They clear their studio, leaving a single, pristine, empty canvas on the easel. They sit in silence, devoid of any idea of what to paint. In that moment of surrendered emptiness, something new can flow in. It is no longer the student's limited skill attempting to create, but a universal inspiration moving through them. The masterpiece that eventually emerges feels as if it painted itself. The student provided the cleared space and the disciplined hand, but the creative impulse, the true genius, came from a source beyond their own crowded mind. Your emptiness is that pristine canvas. It is the necessary clearing that makes inspiration possible. This principle operates in the most practical aspects of daily living. Consider a moment of genuine, unexpected insight. The solution to a problem that has plagued you for weeks at work. You have struggled, you have forced, you have filled your mind with data and strategies to no avail. Finally, in exhaustion, you let it go. You take a walk, you take a shower, you fall asleep. And in that moment of mental emptiness, of non-striving, the answer arrives, full, blown, and perfect, as if gifted to you from nowhere. What happened? You stopped trying to fill the space with your own limited reasoning. You created a vacancy in your consciousness, and a higher order of intelligence and intuitive knowing flowed into that space. The emptiness you cultivated was the very condition that allowed for the revelation. This is the dynamic at play on the grand scale of your spiritual life. The feelings of lack, of incompletion, of yearning were not mistakes. They were the initial stirrings of this sacred capacity. They were the soul's way of saying, I am making room for something the world cannot provide. We misinterpret this process because we assume the solution must be of the same nature as the problem. We feel a lack of peace and try to acquire it from a quiet environment. We feel a lack of love and try to extract it from another person. We feel a lack of power and try to seize it through status or wealth. But these are all attempts to fill a spiritual vacuum with material substitutes. The truth is that the peace, the love, the power you seek are already present as qualities of the infinite. They are not created, they are revealed. They cannot be grasped, they can only be received. Your emptiness is the receptive state, the inner alignment that allows this revelation to occur. You have spent a lifetime building a self, an ego, a personal sense of I. That is the primary occupant of your consciousness. This I is a collection of memories, opinions, desires, and fears. It is a form, and like all forms, it is limited and temporary. The collapse you have experienced is the cracking of this very shell. The emptiness you feel is the space that appears as this self-constructed identity begins to recede. It feels like death because it is a death, the death of the illusion of a separate self, sufficient self. But this death is the prerequisite for rebirth. It is the making of room for the one true identity, the divine. I am. That is your eternal being. You are not becoming a better person. You are dying to the person you thought you were, so that the Christ, the Buddha, nature, the divine reality of you can have a temple in which to dwell. The emptiness is the sanctuary being prepared. It is the quiet, the stillness, the surrendered space where the whisper of the infinite can finally be heard not as an external voice, but as your own. This sacred capacity, this hollowed-out vessel of your being now stands ready, but nature, in its infinite wisdom, abhors a vacuum. This is a spiritual law as immutable as any physical one. The emptiness you have endured is not a final state. It is a transitional one, a state of profound potential. It is the deep, silent inhalation before a divine exhalation. What rushes into this prepared space is not of this world. It cannot be bought, earned, or achieved through any act of personal will, for your personal will was the very barrier that had to be dissolved to create the opening. This is the moment of divine impouring, where the finite yields to the infinite and becomes its conscious vessel. Think of a canyon carved over millennia by the relentless flow of a river. The river has long since changed its course, and now the canyon stands, a vast and empty silence between towering cliffs. Then the sun rises. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, light begins to fill the chasm. It pours into every crevice, illuminates every rock face, warms the cold stone. The canyon does not grasp at the light. It does not strive to become luminous. It simply rests in its own openness, and the light, by its very nature, fills it completely. The canyon's emptiness is its entire capacity to receive the sun's glory. You are that canyon. The struggles, the losses, the disillusionments, they were the river that carved you deep and wide. Now, in the stillness that remains, a light that is not your own begins its inevitable descent. It is the light of pure consciousness, of unconditional love, of unshakable peace. This is the divine impouring. It is not something you do. It is something that happens to you when you are finally, authentically, empty enough to allow it. This is the experience the mystics of all ages have attempted to describe, not as a rare supernatural event, but as the natural state of a consciousness that has been cleared of its obstructions. It is what happens when you stop trying to be loving and instead become transparent to love itself. In a human relationship, when you cease demanding that another person fill your emptiness and instead rest in this inner spaciousness, you may find a love flowing through you that is purer, more patient, and more unconditional than any you could have mustered on your own. It is not your love for them. It is love using your relationship as its channel. The same is true of creativity. The artist, the writer, the musician who touches the eternal does so not from a place of crowded ambition, but from a place of surrendered emptiness. They become the flute through which the universal breath is played. The melody that emerges feels gifted because it is. This impouring is also the source of true power, not power over anything, but the power of unassailable being. Consider a moment of true crisis when all your personal resources, your cleverness, your strength, your plans have been exhausted. You stand at the absolute end of yourself. In that moment of total surrender, a curious calm may descend. A clarity emerges from the chaos. A right action presents itself, not as a calculated decision, but as an undeniable knowing. This is not your power. It is the power of the infinite flowing into the vacuum of your surrendered selfhood. It is the evidence that the divine impouring is not merely a comfort. It is the activation of a higher functionality. You are not being rescued from the situation. You are being operated by a wisdom that understands the situation perfectly. This is the great transition from the life of personal accomplishment to the life of divine demonstration. You are no longer the source, striving to generate goodness, truth, and power. You are the medium through which these qualities, inherent in the infinite, are made visible on the plane of human experience. The emptiness was the preparation for this. Every ache of loneliness was carving out a greater capacity for the experience of divine presence. Every failure was dismantling the illusion of a self-powered success. Every bout of confusion was clearing the way for a knowing that comes from beyond the intellect. The vessel has been scarred clean by the very fires of experience you thought would destroy you. And now, in the quiet readiness of this moment, the first drops of an ocean of grace begin to fall. It is a feeling of being filled from a source within your own being, yet deeper than anything you have ever called I. It is a sustenance that does not depend on external conditions. It is a peace that validates itself not by the absence of trouble, but by its palpable presence in the midst of it. This is the beginning of living not from the outside, in acquiring what you lack, but from the inside out, expressing the infinite fullness that you eternally are. This divine impouring is not an exchange of one temporary condition for another, a better state of mind to replace a worse one. What is flowing into the sacred capacity within you is of an entirely different substance. It is the movement from the temporary to the permanent. All your life, you have been building your home on the shifting sands of the external world, the sands of praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain. You sought security in things that are, by their very nature, subject to change. The emptiness you experienced was the storm that washed that sand away, revealing, perhaps for the first time, the bedrock that was there all along. This is the transition from a life based on the ephemeral to a life grounded in the eternal. It is the discovery of a center of gravity within yourself that does not shift with the changing tides of circumstance. Consider the profound difference between the happiness derived from a new possession and the joy that arises for no reason at all. You buy a new car, and for a time, there is a thrill, a satisfaction. But even in the midst of it, that this feeling is temporary. The car will age. It will get a scratch. It will eventually become ordinary, and the happiness will fade. It was dependent entirely on the condition of the object. Now, contrast that with a moment of pure, uncaused joy. You are walking in a park, not thinking of any great achievement or acquisition, and suddenly a deep, quiet gladness wells up from within. It is not tied to anything. It simply is. This joy does not fade when you leave the park. It is not threatened by a scratch on your car or a problem at work. It exists independently of the world of form. This is a taste of the permanent. It is not something you get, it is something you are, when the obstacles to its awareness are removed. The emptiness cleared the obstacles, and the impouring is the steady, unwavering flow of this inherent, permanent reality into your conscious experience. This is the foundation of a peace that passes all understanding. The world's idea of peace is the absence of conflict. It is a fragile, temporary state constantly threatened by the next phone call, the next headline, the next personal dilemma. The peace of the permanent is something entirely different. It is not the absence of storm, but the presence of a profound stillness at the very core of the storm. It is like the depths of the ocean, where a great calm prevails regardless of the hurricanes raging on the surface. Your life on the surface, the world of relationships, careers, and health may be in tremendous turmoil. Waves of challenge may be crashing down. But once you have made contact with the permanent through the doorway of your own emptiness, you discover a level of your own being that remains untouched, unmoved, and eternally serene. The problems are real on their own level, but they are no longer able to dictate the state of your soul. You have found the one thing that cannot be taken from you. This transition redefines your entire relationship with loss. When your sense of security is invested in the temporary, every loss is a catastrophe. The loss of a job feels like the loss of identity. The loss of a relationship feels like the loss of love itself. The loss of health feels like the loss of life. But when your foundation shifts to the permanent, loss is revealed in its true light. It is only the form that changes. The essence remains. You may lose the specific role of a job, but the intelligence and creativity that you expressed through it are not lost. They are qualities of your eternal being and will find new expression. You may lose the form of a relationship, but if that connection was rooted in truth, the love itself does not die, it transforms, it becomes a different kind of presence in your life. You are not your body, and therefore the decline of the body, while a real experience cannot touch the core of your identity, which is spirit. The permanent is that which never comes and never goes. It is the I am that was before you had a name, that is with you now, and that will be when all the names and forms of this world have faded into silence. To build your life on this is to become unshakable. The winds may blow and the rains may fall, but the house built on this rock will not fall, for it is not a house you built, but the very rock of reality itself, upon which you have been graciously allowed to stand. This entire journey culminates in the most profound and practical shift a human being can make, the transition from seeking to receiving. For your entire life, you have been the seeker. You have been the active agent, striving, grasping, and reaching for God, for truth, for peace, for fulfillment. You have been like a person in a dark room, frantically searching for a light switch, believing that your next effort, your next spiritual technique, your next profound understanding would be the one to finally illuminate the darkness. The emptiness was the exhaustion of that search. It was the final, humbling admission that you cannot find the light by your own efforts, because you have been the one operating in the dark. The collapse of the world of form was the collapse of the seeker itself. And in that collapse, a new posture becomes possible, not of grasping, but of allowing, not of striving, but of yielding, not of seeking, but of receiving. Imagine a farmer at the end of a long, dry season. He has tilled the soil, he has planted the seeds, he has done everything within his power to coax life from the ground. But the earth remains hard, and the seeds lie dormant. He stands in his field, his efforts exhausted, and he looks to the sky. There is nothing left for him to do. He cannot command the clouds. He cannot force the rain. His only remaining role is to be receptive. He must wait, with an open and prepared field, for the gift of rain that can only come from a source beyond his own labor. Your spiritual journey has reached this exact point. You have tilled the soil of your consciousness through your struggles and your yearning. You have planted the seeds of desire for truth. The emptiness has been the long drought that has brought you to the end of your own doing. Now, you are the farmer in the field, no longer striving, but standing in a state of profound, open receptivity, waiting for the rain of grace that you could never command, but can only welcome. This is not a passive state. It is the most active state of all, for it is an activity of the soul, not the ego. It is the active practice of stillness. It is the vigilant cultivation of inner silence. It is the conscious relinquishment of the mental commentary that insists you must be doing something to earn your spiritual keep. In your daily life, this looks like a fundamental change in your response to challenge. Before, when a problem arose, your mind would immediately kick into gear, seeking a solution, wrestling with the issue, trying to figure it out from the limited repository of your past experience and knowledge. Now, there is a new first step. That first step is to become still. It is to consciously acknowledge the emptiness of your own solutions, to create a space of inner silence, and to wait. You are waiting for the impouring, for the intuitive knowing, for the right action to be revealed from a level of intelligence that is not your own. You are moving from being the frantic problem solver to being the clear channel through which a divine solution can emerge. This is the secret behind what the world calls miracles or inspiration. The great composer does not seek the melody. He becomes quiet, and the melody seeks him. The brilliant scientist does not force the breakthrough. He contemplates the data, and then, in a moment of non-striving, the elegant formula presents itself. They have all, in their own way, learned to stop seeking and start receiving. You are learning to apply this to the very substance of your life, to your sense of peace, your sense of identity, your sense of purpose. You are no longer trying to build a meaningful life. You are allowing your life to be filled with the meaning that flows from the infinite. You are no longer trying to become a good person. You are surrendering the person you thought you were so that inherent goodness of your divine nature can express itself without obstruction. The feeling of emptiness was the final, desperate cry of the seeker, the I, that wanted to achieve its own salvation. The fulfillment you now sense is the quiet, steady hum of the receiver. The being that has realized its salvation was present all along, waiting only for the noise of seeking to cease, so it could be heard, so it could be felt, so it could be known as your own eternal and unshakable reality. The search is over, not because you have found the object you were looking for, but because you have awakened to the truth that you are, and always have been, that for which you were searching. You have come here seeking light, but I must tell you plainly, the path you are on is designed to destroy you. The very spiritual awakening you pray for is a hidden crucible, and most who enter it will not remain. They will be turned back, shattered, or lost in a maze of their own creation. This is not about gentle growth or borrowed wisdom. This is an alchemical fire that demands everything you have ever believed. About God, about yourself, about this world, be cast into the flames. There are distinct, relentless stages to this unfolding, and few consciousnesses survive them intact to reach the other shore. You feel the stirring, the divine discontent. But do you have the courage to see what stage of the severance you are now in? Do you dare to look at the precise challenge before you and understand why so many falter? What you will discover here will not comfort the person you think you are. It will begin the sacred work of its dissolution. Listen now and know where you truly stand. Now, let us go directly into the first keynote, understanding this is where the great separation begins. You believe you are seeking God, seeking truth, seeking enlightenment. You have read the books, you have practiced the meditations, you have followed the teachings. Your entire spiritual endeavor is built upon this fundamental premise that you are here, and what you are looking for is there. This is the primal illusion, the very cornerstone of the ego's spiritual empire. You are operating under the assumption of a separation that must be bridged by your effort, your dedication, your worthiness. But I tell you, this seeking is the final, most subtle barrier. It is the activity of the mind dressing itself in sacred robes, convincing itself it is on a pilgrimage, when all the while it is running in circles around its own prison. Consider the person who spends years, decades, searching for love. They move from relationship to relationship, always feeling that something is missing, always looking for the perfect partner to complete them. They are seeking love out there. But what if love is not an external prize to be found, but the very nature of their own being, obscured only by their frantic search? Their seeking is what perpetuates the feeling of lack. It is the same in our soul, called spiritual life. You pray to a God in a distant heaven. You quest for a peace that exists in some future state of attainment. Your daily practice becomes a subtle form of bargaining with the universe. If I sit in silence for this long, if I am kind enough, if I understand this scripture, then I will be rewarded with the experience I desire. This is not spirituality, it is commerce. It is the mind's attempt to control and possess the very thing that cannot be owned. The thrilling, yet terrifying, pivot of this first stage is the dawning realization that you are not the seeker. The sense of I that is doing the seeking is itself the problem. The moment this truth even whispers at the edge of your awareness, your entire constructed world shudders. All your practices, your hard-won spiritual credentials, your identity as a good seeker, a devoted student, they are all threatened. This is why so many turn back here. It is too unsettling. To give up seeking feels like giving up hope, like spiritual suicide. It feels like walking to the edge of a cliff and being asked to step off into nothingness. But the truth is not found in the cessation of activity, but in a profound reorientation of understanding. The shift is from seeking to acknowledging, from striving to surrendering to what is already and always has been, present. The peace you seek is the very silence that exists between your thoughts, not the thought of peace you are chasing. The God you pray to is the very consciousness that is aware of the prayer, not the conceptual deity you are addressing. Your daily life becomes the laboratory for this discovery. That moment of sheer frustration when your meditation feels empty and fruitless? What if that very emptiness, stripped of your judgment of it, is the reality you were seeking all along? That instant of sudden, unbidden beauty, a shaft of light through a window, the laughter of a child, that stops your mental chatter completely. In that pause, where were you seeking? You were not. You were simply being. And in that being, what you sought was present. This is the great and challenging transition from being a seeker on a path to becoming the very ground upon which the path appears. It means looking at your daily rituals, your morning contemplation, your acts of service, and asking a terrifying question: am I doing this to get somewhere, or am I doing this as an expression of the love and life that is already here, moving as me? The difference is everything. One is a burden fueled by lack. The other is a celebration. When you sit to be with God, you must begin to discard the image of whom you are sitting with, and instead rest in the awareness that is doing the sitting. You are not a vessel waiting to be filled from a source outside. You are the ocean mistaking itself for a single, isolated wave, crying out for water. The mind will revolt. It will scream that this is passivity, that you must strive, that you must purify, that you must progress. It will conjure up new, more refined things to seek. Seeking, non-seeking, perhaps. The work here is to see that every impulse to seek is just another ripple on the surface. Your responsibility is not to follow the ripple, but to gently, persistently, turn attention back to the depth from which it arose. You begin to see that every problem, every ache, every longing in your human experience was an invitation to seek. And now you are learning the radical response, to stop and to listen, not for an answer, but to the very presence that is listening. The seeker dissolves, and what remains is a startling, simple, and unshakable fact. You are the living presence of the divine itself, and all your seeking was merely its play to rediscover its own face in the mirror of your experience. This realization does not come as a blast of light, but as a quiet certainty that steals into your heart when you are not looking, ending the search by revealing that you were never, for one instant, separate from what you sought. And so, with the ground of seeking pulled from beneath your feet, you find yourself not in a glorious new dawn, but in a profound and terrifying emptiness. This is the second great trial, where everything you thought you knew about God, about yourself, about the nature of reality, is called to the altar for sacrifice. You have glimpsed that you are not the seeker, but in that glimpse, the old structures of belief and meaning begin to crumble. The faith you had, the faith in a benevolent universe that rewards good deeds, the faith in a personal God who answers prayers, the faith in spiritual progress as a linear ascent. That faith shatters against the rocks of pure, unadorned experience. This is not a loss of belief in something. It is the death of the known itself. You will recognize this stage in the quiet desperation of your daily life. It is the moment when, after years of devoted prayer, a crisis strikes and your petitions seem to vanish into a silent, uncaring sky. The old formulas no longer work. You have done everything right, yet here you are facing illness, loss, or betrayal. The contract you thought you had with the divine has been nullified, and you are left standing in the ruins of your understanding. It feels like betrayal. It may feel like God has abandoned you, or worse, that God was never there at all. This is the crisis of faith, and it is not a sign of your failure. It is a necessary demolition. The childhood faith, the conceptual God, the spiritual rule book, these were all creations of the mind. They were ideas about truth, not truth itself. And now, truth is requiring you to release the idea so that the reality may emerge. This death is a visceral, disorienting process. Consider the artist who has built a magnificent sculpture over a lifetime, only to realize the very clay they used is illusory. To create something true, they must let the old form dissolve into formless clay again. Or think of the dedicated professional who has built their identity upon a career, a title, a set of accomplishments, only to be made redundant. The initial terror is not about the loss of income, but the loss of self. Ooh, am I without this? This is the precise spiritual question now. Who are you without the comforting concepts of God you have carried? The mind, in its panic, will rush to rebuild. It will scramble for a new teaching, a more sophisticated philosophy, a deeper mystical experience to fill the void. This is the most critical juncture. To build anew is to stay within the known. The invitation here is to do the unthinkable, to stay in the void, to resist the urge to replace the old idol with a new, more spiritually correct one. Your daily experience becomes a series of surrenders. You face a problem, and your instinct is to turn to your old prayer, your old spiritual understanding for solace and solution. But now, that inner cupboard is bare. The words ring hollow. The thrill of this stage, its terrifying allure, is that you are being pushed to a frontier beyond understanding. You are being asked to walk without a map, to trust a guidance that does not speak in the language of your mind's expectations. It means sitting with your financial fear without demanding an instant solution from God. It means facing a relationship's breakdown without clinging to a spiritual platitude about divine will. It means allowing the grief, the anger, the profound sense of spiritual homelessness to be there, without an immediate spiritual interpretation. You are being stripped of every intermediary. This is where the divine as a comforting idea dies, so that the divine as the very fabric of your being may be revealed. It is a transition from faith, in something, to a silent, wordless intimacy with the source of all being. It is the movement from believing in God to unknowingly abiding as the very life that God is. The mind interprets this as a dark night, a period of aridity. But in truth, it is a profound act of grace. You are being weaned from the milk of concepts so you can digest the solid food of pure being. The comfort you received from your beliefs was a temporary shelter. Now, the shelter is being removed not to leave you exposed, but to reveal that you are, and always have been, the boundless sky itself, unchanging, untouched by the storms that pass through it. The old known must die because it was a limitation, a box for the infinite. Your grief is not for the loss of God, but for the loss of your idea of God. And in that very grief, if you do not turn away, you may sense something startling. A presence that is not separate from the achy itself. A vast, silent awareness that holds the feeling of abandonment without being abandoned. This is the birth of a knowing that requires no beliefs. It is a confidence not in something, but in nothing. And that nothing is the fertile ground of all that is. The crisis, therefore, is the birth pangs of a consciousness that is moving from relationship with God to the realization of identity as God. The death of the known is not an end. It is the ruthless, compassionate precondition for coming alive to what you truly are, beyond all names and forms. Having passed through the silent dissolution of all you knew, a new and subtle danger arises, more alluring and deceptive than the void itself. This is the stage of the false summit, the spiritual climax that feels like an arrival, but is in fact a beautifully disguised plateau. After the austerity of unknowing, the mind, ever cunning, is presented with a profound experience, a state of perfect peace, an ecstatic union, a vision of divine light, or a sustained period of effortless joy. And it declares, this is it. I have arrived. The journey is over. You have mistaken the ecstasy of the breakthrough for the final destination. This is perhaps the most common point of departure for those who will not survive the full ascent, for who would willingly leave paradise. You will see this in your own life. After a long period of struggle in your career, you finally land the prestigious position. The initial euphoria is immense. You feel validated, successful. You have made it. But soon, the new role becomes simply another set of challenges, and the lingering question of deeper purpose quietly returns. The promotion was not the final answer. It was a temporary experience of success. In the same way, the spiritual experience, no matter how luminous, how convincing, is an event of in-consciousness, not the permanent nature of consciousness. It comes and it will go. To build your home upon it is to build on sand. This ecstasy is the divine's gift, a taste of reality to encourage the traveler, but it is not the reality itself. It is the sweetness of the fruit, not the root and soil of the tree. The mind, however, desperate for achievement and conclusion, seizes upon it. It creates a new spiritual identity. The enlightened one, the realized being, the chosen channel. You may find yourself speaking with newfound authority, subtly looking upon others as less advanced. Your daily practice may shift from open-hearted seeking to a maintenance of this special state, a clinging to the peak experience. You become a curator of your own ecstasy, protecting it from anything that might diminish its glow. This is the ego's final, magnificent fortress, built not of stone but of golden light. Consider the musician who, after years of practice, experiences a night of perfect performance. The fusion with the music is absolute. Time stops. It is a transcendent event. If they believe that this experience is their mastery, they are lost. True mastery is not that single night of grace, but the capacity to show up at the instrument day after day in inspiration and in drudgery, regardless of the experience. The ecstatic night is a confirmation of the path, not the path itself. Spiritually, the blissful state is a confirmation of your true nature, but to mistake the confirmation for the substance is to halt the journey. The work here is one of ruthless humility and discernment. It requires you to enjoy the sunrise without demanding the sun stop its movement to preserve the perfect moment. You must learn to receive the ecstasy without claiming ownership of it, to let it wash through you without building a monument where it once stood. In practical terms, this means when you arise from a meditation of sublime silence, you do not spend your day comparing every subsequent moment to that benchmark. You do not dismiss your human irritations, your fatigue, your ordinary thoughts as unspiritual or as failures because they do not match the peak. That is the mind creating a duality between the sacred experience and the so-called mundane moment, a division that does not exist in reality. The thrill of this stage is the recognition that the ecstasy was not something you attained, but something that was always, already the case, momentarily recognized. The peace you felt was not manufactured by your practice. It was the ever-present background momentarily noticed because the usual noise subsided. The false summit is a test. Will you cling to the experience, or will you let it go and continue to walk? Now, with the quiet knowing that what you glimpsed is not a distant place to reach, but the very ground you are walking upon, to continue, you must leave the comforts of the spiritual resort and re-enter the wilderness, not as a seeker, but as one who carries the quiet memory of home within them, a memory so integrated it no longer needs to be recalled, only lived. The light you saw was not a light at the end of your tunnel. It was the revelation that you yourself are the luminous tunnel, and the journey is the light discovering its own length and breadth in every step, every breath, every seemingly ordinary moment of this human life. After the ecstasy has faded and the mind's claim to a permanent summit has been exposed, you are led into a landscape that feels like utter desolation. This is the long walk through the desert of spiritual aridity. The vivid experiences have passed, the comforting beliefs are gone, and what remains is a flat, dry plane of ordinary existence that seems utterly devoid of the divine presence. Where once you felt connected, inspired, and alight, now you feel nothing. Your meditation feels empty, your prayers seem to hit a low ceiling and fall back to earth, and your daily life returns to its routine with a vengeance, now stripped of the spiritual gloss that once made it meaningful. This is the true test of endurance, where the thrill of discovery is replaced by the discipline of fidelity. This aridity is not a punishment, nor is it a sign that you have done something wrong. It is, in fact, a necessary and purifying fire. The early consolations, the peace, the joy, the sense of union, were encouragements for the infant soul, sweeteners to wean you from the world's pleasures. Now, You are being weaned from the pleasure of spirituality itself. You are being asked to love the truth, even when it offers no sensation in return, to walk the path when there is no visible light, only the faint memory of a star you once followed. This is where the seeker's love of spiritual feeling is transformed into the disciple's love of the principle itself, beyond all feeling. You know this experience in your human relationships. The initial rush of romantic love, the intoxication of new connection, inevitably settles. If the relationship is to deepen, it must move beyond the thrill of passion into the steady, sometimes uneventful, commitment of daily love, making breakfast, sharing burdens, sitting in comfortable silence. The feeling of being in love may come and go, but the substance of love is what remains and is chosen moment by ordinary moment. So it is here. The desert is where your connection to the divine ceases to be a fluctuating experience and is forged into a non-negotiable fact of your being, independent of any internal weather. In this desert, the mind will whisper its most persuasive lies. You have been abandoned. It was all an illusion. You have gone backwards. Everyone else is having visions and breakthroughs. Only you are stuck in this dry emptiness. This is the critical hour. To believe these whispers is to turn back, to spend your life chasing the next spiritual experience, the next teacher, the next technique that will reignite the feeling. But to continue walking, putting one foot in front of the other in simple, faithful practice when no reward is forthcoming, that is the action that forges spiritual maturity. You practice not to ever get peace, but because peace, in its essence, is the truth, and you are aligning with truth regardless of the sensation. You sit in silence not to achieve communion, but because silence is the womb of communion, and you honor it even when it feels barren. Your daily life becomes the raw material of this stage. Doing the dishes becomes your meditation. Answering emails becomes your prayer. Caring for a sick child, managing financial anxiety, facing loneliness. These are not distractions from your spiritual life. They are the very furnace of it now. The question is no longer, where is the divine in this? But, can I be present to this task, this discomfort, this joy, without demanding that it give me a spiritual experience? You are learning to find the infinite not in spite of the finite, but as the finite. The grain of wood in the table, the sound of traffic, the weight of your own body, these are not obstacles to overcome. They are the very texture of the reality you are here to know as one. This aridity, this feeling of God's absence, is the final stripping away of a relationship based on mutual gratification. It prepares you for a union that is so total, so seamless, that there is no longer a you and a God to have a relationship. The desert burns away the last vestiges of the seeker, leaving only the terrain itself. And in that scorched, silent clarity, a most subtle shift occurs. You begin to sense that the emptiness you feared is not empty at all. It is a profound fullness that has no opposite. The peace you miss as a feeling is discovered as the very substance of your being, so constant you had ceased to notice it like the hum of your own blood. The divine presence did not leave. You are being turned inside out, so that instead of looking for a presence in your experience, you realize you are awake as presence, experiencing a world. The desert, by taking everything away, finally allows you to see what was there all along the vast, open sky of your own awareness, in which every experience, ecstasy and aridity alike, appears and disappears like a wandering cloud. You are not walking through a desert. You are discovering that you are the boundless space in which the very concept of a desert arises. Having navigated the desert, you approach what seems to be the final gate, only to discover the most cunning and intimate adversary of all, one that has been walking beside you every step of the way. This is the confrontation with the self as the final barrier. Every previous stage has been a stripping away of concepts, experiences, and consolations that you believed were external to you. Now, the work turns inward with a terrifying focus. The you that has endured the seeking, weathered the crisis of faith, enjoyed the ecstasy, and trudged through the aridity. This very sense of a central, enduring self is revealed to be the ultimate illusion, the final knot in the fabric of consciousness that must be undone. This is not a philosophical idea. It is a direct, visceral challenge to the core of your assumed identity. This unfolds in daily life as a profound and unsettling self-awareness. You notice how every action, every reaction, every seemingly selfless gesture is tinged with a subtle claim of ownership. You give charity, and a hidden part of you registers it as evidence of your goodness. You remain patient in a trying situation, and there is a whisper of pride in your spiritual accomplishment. Even the desire for liberation itself is seen to be the self's most brilliant strategy. The ego's desire to attain a state where the ego no longer exists. You see the mechanism of I, constantly reasserting itself, claiming every experience, every insight, every hardship as its own property, its own story. My awakening? My journey? My challenge? The central character of the narrative stands revealed not as the hero, but as the author of the very confinement from which it seeks to escape. Consider the artist who, after years of effort, finally creates a masterpiece. The world applauds, but the true test comes not in the creation, but in the reception of the acclaim. Does the praise solidify a sense of being a great artist, or can it be received and allowed to pass through without sticking to a permanent identity? The moment the thought, I am the one who did this, crystallizes, the creative flow becomes burdened with a persona. In the same way, your spiritual understanding becomes a weight the moment it becomes, my understanding, a possession that separates you. The unseen foe is this reflexive habit of appropriation, the mental tag that labels every aspect of life as mine. This stage is a relentless process of divine surgery performed without anesthetic. It is the dismantling of the center around which your entire universe has revolved. You watch yourself in conversation, noticing the urge to steer the topic back to yourself. You observe irritation arise and see the immediate, almost electric, charge of, I am being offended. The thrill here is one of shocking clarity. You see that the sense of a separate, continuous self is not a thing, but an activity, a constant, frantic doing of claiming, remembering, and projecting. It is a verb masquerading as a noun. And you are asked to bear witness to this activity without identifying with it, without trying to stop it, and most treacherously, without turning, that witnessing into a new, more subtle spiritual identity. The mind will attempt every evasion. It will propose a new project, kill the ego. But who is the one wielding that sword? It is the ego itself, now in the guise of a spiritual warrior. The work is not destruction, but seeing, a sustained, gentle, and impartial seeing that loosens the glue of identity. You do not fight the thought, I am. You simply notice the space in which it arises and falls. You begin to relate to your own history, your personality, your achievements and failures, as you would to the history of a character in a book, with interest, perhaps, but without the visceral sense that it is you. Your flaws are no longer personal failures, but patterns of energy. Your talents are not personal possessions, but passing currents. This is where the last vestige of a practitioner falls away. There is no one left to do the practice. There is only life happening and a luminous, empty awareness that is one with the happening. The barrier was never a wall to break down. It was a shadow cast by the mistaken belief in being a separate entity. As this belief is seen through, not by force, but by the light of pure attention, a staggering simplicity emerges. The love you sought to express was never yours to generate. It is what remains when the you that tries to love steps aside. The peace you craved was never a state to be achieved. It is the natural condition when the frantic activity of self-construction ceases. You are not becoming selfless. You are discovering that the very premise of a self was an overlay, a story told so convincingly you forgot you were the listener, vast and untouched, and not the character suffering and striving within the tale. The final confrontation ends not with a victory, but with a quiet disappearance of the one who was fighting, revealing that what remains was, is, and always will be wholly free. When the last barrier of self has been seen through, when the central character of your story has quietly dissolved from protagonist to passing cloud, you arrive not at a pinnacle of knowing, but at the very foundation of not knowing. This is the grace of unknowing, the silent arrival that was always here. It is not an attainment of new, sublime knowledge to replace the old. It is the falling away of the very need to know, to define, to grasp the infinite with the finite instruments of the mind. After the profound confrontations and arduous journeys, this stage feels like no stage at all. It is the absence of seeking, the absence of a path, and most startlingly, the absence of a traveler who has arrived anywhere. There is only this, ordinary, simple, and utterly complete. This unknowing is not ignorance. It is the opposite of ignorance. It is the mind's humble, joyous surrender to a reality so immediate and so total that it can never be an object of knowledge. You spent a lifetime collecting facts, beliefs, and spiritual concepts, building a library of understanding. Now, you stand in the open air, and the library, while perhaps still visible, is understood to be a collection of maps, not the territory. The territory is the ground beneath your feet, the air in your lungs, the sound of a distant bird, all perceived directly, without the intermediary of a single thought saying, "This is what this is." The thrill here is one of breathtaking simplicity. The search for God ends because you realize you have been looking at God, as God, through God's own eyes, and the word, God, itself is just another fragile concept dissolving in the living reality. You see this in the most mundane moments. You are washing a cup. There is simply the coolness of water, the smoothness of porcelain, the movement of hand and cloth. There is no, "I am washing a cup." There is just the washing. The experience is whole, intimate, and free of narration. Or you hear news, perhaps difficult news. There is a surge of sensation, emotion, thought, a storm passing through the atmosphere of awareness. But the old, solid me that would have been at the center of that storm, claiming it, fighting it, or collapsing under it, is conspicuously absent. There is just the storm and the vast, still space that holds it which you are. This is not dissociation. It is the most profound association possible. A direct participation in life, unmediated by the fiction of a separate self. The mind, even now, may try to conceptualize this state to claim it as enlightenment or non-dual awareness, creating a new and final spiritual badge. But the beauty of this unknowing is that it quietly refuses all such labels. Any label would be a limitation, a knowing, and this reality is prior to and inclusive of all knowing. You find you cannot even honestly say, "I am one with everything," for that implies a memory of separation to contrast it with. There is simply everything, and no separate I, to be one with it. The peace is so fundamental, it is not recognized as peace. It is simply the absence of conflict. The love is so unconditional, it is not recognized as love. It is simply the way things are when nothing is in the way. In practical terms, life goes on. You still have a name, a history, responsibilities. But these are now like clothes worn lightly without the conviction that they define the wearer. You may still use spiritual language, but the words are empty of weight, used as fingers pointing at a moon that is already shining brightly on the face of the one looking. You discover that your entire spiritual journey, with all its harrowing stages and brilliant insights, was a long, necessary detour to arrive back where you started, but without the belief that you were ever a separate entity that had left. The seeker was the path, and the destination was the discovery that there was only ever the path, and you were not the traveler upon it, but the substance of the path itself. This is the silent arrival. It is not dramatic. There are no fireworks. In fact, the longing for fireworks is seen as just another ripple, another ghost of the old seeking. There is a deep, quiet humor in realizing that what you spent a lifetime pursuing was not a thing to be gained, but a simple, ever-present fact to be recognized, and that the recognition itself does not belong to anyone. It is the universe recognizing itself. The grace is that this is not a personal achievement, but a gift that was always extended once the hands that were too busy grasping were finally exhausted, emptied. You live now not from a center called me, but from the totality of the present moment, which is seamlessly both impersonal and intimately personal. The separate drop has not vanished. It has simply, and at last, realized it was always the ocean, and in that knowing, even the concept of ocean is too small, too known. You abide in a mystery that is no longer a problem to be solved, but a reality to be lived, breath by unknowing breath.